Good morning, Fuller Life Church. I hope you are ready and reared for a good sermon here today, coming from a book that I've never preached on here at Fuller Life, so I'm excited about that today. Our scripture today is going to be taken from Proverbs chapter 22 today. There's your sermon title, This is My Father's World. Somehow that's going to play into this sermon, so you're going to want to hear for that. This is my Father's world, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1 to 16. It'll be from the English Standard Version. How I'd like to do it is, I'm going to read verse 1. As a congregation, you read verse 2. We'll go back and forth until verse 16. We'll read it all together. Okay? Proverbs chapter 22, verses 1 to 16. Hear the word of the Lord. A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver or gold. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it.
The reward for humility and fear of the Lord is riches and honor and life.
Thorns and snares are in the way of the crooked. Whoever guards his soul will keep far from them.
Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender.
Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail.
Whoever has a bountiful eye will be blessed, for he shares his bread with the poor.
Drive out a scoffer, and strife will go out, and quarreling and abuse will cease.
He who loves purity of heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king as his friend.
The eyes of the Lord keep watch over knowledge, like the overthrows the words of the traitor.
The sluggard says, "There's a lion outside! I shall be killed in the streets!" Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. Together? Whoever oppresses the poor to increase his own wealth or gives to the rich will only come to poverty. This is the word of the Lord. Let the people of God say, thanks be to God. Let us pray. Almighty, all-knowing, all-wise God, whom we name as Lord. Jesus, you have shown us your wisdom in giving up your life for us so that we could regain fellowship with your Father. Thank you that by your Spirit today we have trust that what we hear today will be life-giving because your word is before us. So may the entrance of your words unfold light to us and give understanding to the simple today, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. We're in the book of Proverbs. As I mentioned, this is the first time I'm preaching on this at Fuller Life. It's not a common book I usually go to, but as it should so happen, this text has fallen in our laps. And I want to just give a number of things here about the book of Proverbs that I just want you to think about as a way of going into what is for us today. Proverbs are not to be heard simply as good advice. There's something more going on here. Rather, they're meant to be heard as God's own invitation to learn wisdom from previous generations. I can't tell you how concerned I am that we're in a generation that doesn't listen to people older than themselves. I'm really concerned about that. I just find that really odd. I've grown up always having older people blessing me. So I guess, personally speaking, that's always been a big thing for me. But I'm noticing that society wants to listen to young people. And I think it's because marketers want to sell things to young people, is more what it sounds like. But older people aren't getting the respect they deserve in society, in my opinion. They're being treated as irrelevant once they don't work anymore. That ain't right. That's a justice issue, I might add. And when people are older, they have so much to give to us. If we're willing to listen to them and not treat them like they're long-winded or they don't have, they're going on and on about the same old stories, Listen, I like to hear some about the war stories of my great-grandpa jumping out of an airplane and, breaking his tooth, falling down, like learning that he lied to get into the army to go into World War II. I kind of want to hear these stories because it gives me a sense of, like, okay, so he didn't get it right when he did it, and it's okay if I don't know everything at this time, but I can trust that God could lead me through it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I need older people. We need older people around us. Proverbs is about learning wisdom from previous generations is why this book is committed to God's word. Further, it's meant to be a reference work is how I understand it, Proverbs is. It's one of those things you'll go back to time and time again. It's never a one and done. Oh, I read the book of Proverbs already. No, it's something you constantly go back to. You want to think about these Proverbs because unless you've memorized them, they're constantly yielding wisdom and insight and things that I think can give us a lot of perspective where we need it most at our times. I also want to make clear, though, that Proverbs are not promises. The most well-known proverb that I think all of us here would know to some level, even if you don't know it verbatim, you at least have seen it on walls or elsewhere. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him and he will direct your paths. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. That's not a promise, right? But that is nonetheless something that shows us that through, further it goes into, we're ranging in the realm of probabilities here, not guarantees. And I think that's a good way of understanding it. Probabilities that the wise sage has seen that those who trust in the Lord, God guides their heart. He's seeing this. But he's not speaking absolutists as if these are promises. Other books of the Bible will do that. Proverbs is not aiming at that with these Proverbs. Let's be clear on that. Further, they don't focus on the exceptions, but general rule. I think that's a big one about Proverbs. Because there's always going to be that thing, but what about this person that this happened to them that's opposite to what the Proverbs say? Well, it's not dealing with exceptions. We live in a society today of very wide-ranging, ridiculous stories that happen, and we hear it as if it's happening every day, right? It's called news. And you know how the news syndicates work, right? They're picking these stories. They have hundreds of stories to choose from in a day, and they're choosing the ones that they think will get the most likes or views or interest. That's why they're doing it, right? But the truth is that as a general rule, if you read Proverbs, trusting the Lord with all your heart is a wise direction to take in life, right? Lastly, life is too complex for simplistic notions. So that's why we need Proverbs. They help us recognize the complexities, but also to discern that this is a good pattern to walk forward in. So these are just pointers from the book of Proverbs just to get our feet wet in a book that I think we need. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Juliet. What is in a name? This is taken from Shakespeare. You may be familiar with Romeo and Juliet. I think every school had their specific Shakespearean dramas that you had to do. I don't know if Romeo and Juliet was yours. Mine was Midsummer Night Dream. Had to do Oberon, had to memorize 78 lines. And that's just me remembering something that happened. I don't know if Romeo and Juliet was your story that you had to read through, but I think you know something about how it's popularly known. I have this excerpt here because I like context more than just giving you the one line. And it comes here from this portion of the play where it says, "'Tis but thy name that is my enemy." So this is Juliet speaking, right? And a conundrum means she's in a pickle, like she has a problem here. So she says, "'Tis but thy name is that is my enemy. Thou art thyself, though not a Montague." What's Montague? So that's what Romeo is, right? He's not me, is what she's saying. And that's actually keeping her from being able to be with him, right? It is not, and here's, follow her logic now, it is not, or it is nor hand, nor foot, nor arm, nor face, nor any other part belonging to a man. Oh, be some other name. What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. So Romeo would, were he not Romeo called, retain that dear perfection which he owes without that title. Romeo, doff thy name, and for that name, which is no part of thee, take all myself. So this is a familiar phrase, what's in a name. And she's really saying there should be nothing in a name, right? Like, what's in a name? It's keeping us from being able to be together. And so she's struggling, though, with the social binding custom, though, that there is something in a name. That's why she's fighting against it, because of her love for Romeo. That's her conundrum she's in. So we're talking about chapter 22, verse 1 here, where it says, a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches, and favor is better than silver and gold. A good name is to be chosen. Considering a good name. I'm not familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with the fellow on the right-hand side there, but he's a coach. He's not just any coach, actually. His name is Vince Lombardi. He's the one who the Super Bowl trophy is named after, if you're familiar at all with football. He was a very successful coach, also went to Mass every day, and so a good Catholic. Is a good Catholic a bad Christian? Anyway, so coaching wisdom is what we're going at here. And the coaching wisdom, I know I've had the honor of being a coach as well. And I can remember coaching a flag football team. And at one point, the guys were so competitive that I needed to remind them that what is on the front of your jersey is who you're repping, and it's more important than the name on your back. And that was something I think resonated with them, because we ended up starting to get some games winning here. But they understood what we're about, is what that means, right? And it's always true, is that the name on the front is more important than the name on the back. There's some coaching wisdom for you. So I wonder, if you were asked, what's your name, what would you put there? Now it sounds, I guess, perfunctory or, obvious. However, maybe not. Maybe you would put your Chinese name, for example. Sometimes when we get some of the funds that come in our church, your Chinese name shows up instead. And I actually got to do some sourcing here, and I got to figure this out and think this through about who is this person. Because a lot of you are using your Chinese name when it comes to your banking, interestingly enough, right? Might be how your parents set it up. I don't know why it's that way, but I'm just saying, what would you put as your name? Is it your Chinese name? Is it your, you're at one of these, seminars, so just call me, and then you just use your short form of your first name kind of thing, because we're all just getting to know each other here. What's your name? A good name is to be chosen rather than great riches. Remember that. So notice that the contrast here is that good is modest, right? Great is like, wow. I mean, we sung about God being great. Maybe it's my church background, I don't know. But I kind of get hesitant saying God is great all the time. Because you know which religion is known for using it the most to say God is great? Islam, right? But it's not wrong to say God is great. Let me be clear, because the Psalms use that. So we're not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just mindful of it. So when we sing God is great, we always like to go great because it sounds bombastic. He's amazing. He's better than everyone else. But there's something also about God that I've learned where he's humble. And he really isn't really always looking to create that kind of bombastic feature about himself. So watch the wisdom of this. It says a good name, which is very lowly, just common, ordinary, is better than great riches, right? You hear the greatness, but there's something better than great, and it's good. That totally goes against a society which is constantly drunk on their own wisdom that says we're always wanting to go from good to great anyway, right? Well, actually, the sage here, sage is the wise man of the Proverbs, he's saying, how about we go from great to good? That already shows you he's a wise man, or he's stupid because nobody else talks like that. We have to decide that in terms of how we're going to live our lives. What's your name? So let's get some wisdom here. First and last. Our name is not simply to be truncated. That means to be downsized just to your first name. When you think about what is the good name that you're pursuing, it isn't your first name that should come to your mind, even though that might be your first thought. No, actually, you need to be thinking about connecting the good name with your last name as well. How would it change your perspective to actually hear your entire name as opposed to just your first name when thinking about the good name? The good name speaking about your repute, about who you are and what you want to be known for in a good way. I have a picture on to the right-hand side. I don't think anybody here would appreciate nor care much about it, but I'm going to give you the historical context that will at least help you understand why it matters. So you know my favorite team's the Chicago White Sox. We're having like a running commentary for some reason. I think it's baseball season. Yeah, that's what their fans are doing currently right now. They're 4-15. They're not doing very well, folks. They're the worst team in baseball. But in 1963, they did something that did change the way professional sports and just organized sports has been affected, is that they were the first team ever to put the last name of the player on the back of the jersey. Luis Aparicio, the good Venezuelan, was and so that's a Chicago White Sox jersey, and they were the first ones to showcase someone's name on the back. I think it's helpful to remember that even though we're saying what's on the front is more important than the name on the back, your last name actually matters a lot. Because, okay, I can remember a time where I mean, we all been through some stuff, and my own existential stuff is no different. And I can remember going through a time where I just absolutely made a complete fool of myself, and I'd done wrong, and I knew it was wrong. And I remember when confessing up to it, I remember wanting to apologize for everyone in my family that I had disgraced by my ways. It wasn't that Ian did wrong. It's that Ian Scott did wrong. I shamed my family. It wasn't just my first name. We live in a society today where everything's usually about the first name, though, because it's about you, right? But if you hold together first and last name, you understand you're in a line here. Like, it's not just you. You're repping somebody else, and they're in your family, right? You can bring honor to your family's name by the way you live. That's what a good name will do, and that's more important than all the stocks that gain big amounts and percentages every year, than the accruing value you get in your portfolio. How you honor that name is more important than how much money you make and earn. Think about that. That is not an obvious thought, because society doesn't teach that, right? But you will hear it in a church, because there's something more important than money. And that which is more important is a good name. Well, there's the other side of the coin, too. And the other side of the coin is that as Christians, it's necessary to see Jesus Christ's name as the good name. You can't leave him out, because you're a Christian. You don't just rep your biological family. You're repping also, your church family, who is known by Christ. Now, here's what I want to be careful, though, about. We are not trying to live up to his name as if, I got to live up to those standards. And in that way, it could turn into a works righteousness thing where I'm trying to earn favor from God. You understand what I mean? Rather, we live into and thereby out of his name, because he's your identity. You're a Christian, first and foremost. And so the other side of the coin is that Jesus Christ, and I use both of his names here, because Christ now I've talked time and time again about how it's not his last name. But in a very real way, Christ now is forever attached to Jesus because of the gospel. And by the way, the gospel is good news, right? God is modest. We're not. We all need to be lowered and humble ourselves, not God. God, I hope you get to know God's ways as one who helps you to be grounded. The devil's out to humiliate you. He wants to just sinisterly grovel you in the ground and make you feel humiliated. But not God. God wants to humble you, though. He wants you to stay grounded. And one of the ways you do that is remembering your roots, remembering where you came from. So remember your last name, but remember Christ, because he's the one who gives value to your name altogether. He's the one that's restoring your family line, because you got a Christian now in that family line. Maybe multiple ones. And down the road for the generations to come, there'll be other Christians that will remember you who were in that family line that blessed the line. I believe God is honored by that. So let's remember, Jesus Christ is the good name that is to be chosen. Amen? So, verse 1 summation. If we could take all this, what we're saying here, why does the wise sage, I'm calling that the one who's the author of Proverbs, presumably Solomon, why does the wise sage say that a good name is to be chosen rather than great riches? Well, because you could get a lot of wealth. And this is going to be the preoccupation of this particular focus in Proverbs of the writer to presumably those who are youth in the courts, is that you could attain great wealth and cheat your way to getting it. But you can't do that with a good name. That's why he's saying this. Because he's saying, I have a problem with people who are getting their wealth through illegitimate means. You know what's been said that John F. Kennedy, you remember John F. Kennedy, 1963, U.S. president, he was also assassinated. His claim to fame in the United States for his family, the Kennedy family, was known to have happened through the mob. It was through racketeering and extortion and blood money. That's how his family got wealthy. If you've noticed his family line, there's been tragic death after tragic death after tragic death that's taken place as well. It's an ominous reminder. You might be gaining wealth in your family, but how are you getting that wealth is what God cares about a whole lot. And if you're getting it off the backs of people where you're cheating your way to get there, God's against you. Let's be clear on that. Choose the good name, because that'll come through virtue. That's going to come through you becoming trusted. Listen, one of the things I have to deal with in my day-to-day life, I think it's just the stage of adulthood, and you'll be there too, is dealing with contractors. To no end, contractors give me grief. I am not wanting to speak ill of them, you understand, but it's the way the industry is made, is that contractors can be anybody who essentially wants to help you in your house, let's say, right? Or they want to help us in our house here. And they want to help, because you're paying them a service, they're going to do the work for you. But one of the things about contractors that can be very difficult is that they can also be very slippery in the sense that they don't always follow the rules. And because they're doing something technical for you, you don't necessarily understand everything they're doing. I can recall in our old house, we had somebody that was hired to do the basement washroom. Well, they had done the basement washroom and looked fine and well, and maybe a few things there could have been done differently, but overall it was fine. It was running. The water's running, and, you could go in and out of the shower, toilet runs. But what was ominous to me was learning later on, when we needed to get a little work done inside in the shower, it was learned by a family friend who then helped us at that time, that the fellow who had made that basement portion there had taken all the garbage and put it in the walls. So, why did he do that? Because it costs money to throw out debris. I can recall time and again when I used to live on Evansville, going on Cleedon, that in the open field there would always be garbage bags there, randomly. And you'd see sinks, toilets. You knew exactly what happened. The contractor just chucked it all there, irresponsibly. And here's the thing that bothers me, is that they're not held accountable. They don't have anyone to answer to. They're Joe contractors, just doing you a job. That bugs me. Finding a contractor with a good name. I think every church needs to be sourced on who's a good mechanic, who's a good dentist, right? We need these people because they're reliable and they can help people in the community. That's part of being resourceful as a community, is can you point me to good tutors if I need them? Can you point me to good people who can get me, drive me to the airport or something and not, flag me up on a bill? Can you find me somebody reliable and trustworthy, is what I'm saying. And with contract work, too many times, that's a problem. It was because of this that I chose to get ordained as a pastor. My journey as a pastor was, I started in 2004 officially on April Fool's Day. Joke's on me. And I remember when starting out, I was asked within the first month, I was like, oh, you want to get ordained? I'm like, I ain't care about no ordination. I'm not here for that. I'm here to serve God's people, and they'll know whether I love them or not. That's what I cared about. Listen, I'm 25, all guns are ablazing. I just want to serve and love God. I ain't got time for all your bureaucracy and all the other stuff, right? I just want to get this thing. I just want to serve people. I don't want red tape. I hate politics. Let's go. Something happened on the way to glory, though, around 2017, 2018, where I was realizing the Lord was speaking to me about this. He's like, Ian, if you wanted to get a plumber, would you just get anybody? I'm like, well, no, Lord, how I feel about water in the house, and I'm always freaking out. Well, definitely scared in this place about water. Anyway, bind that demon. But I need to focus here. Yes, Lord, I want a certified plumber. How about an electrician? Obviously. What about a pastor? What? Does that matter? I don't know. Why does it matter that an electrician's an electrician and a plumber's a plumber? Why does it matter? That started my journey towards recognizing ordination is not about me. It's about the people I serve would have a sense of trust. That was a long journey, because my dad growing up, he would never acknowledge anybody as reverend or pastor, like titles. He's like, because he saw a lot of corruption, obviously. But now I'm not my dad, right? I'm me, even though I carry the same last name as him, and I want to honor family, but I also recognize you got to be certified, because it builds trust with people, and that's what people need, especially in this stage of adulthood. So where you're at this stage, the question is, do people have credibility with you? When your name goes next to it, do people know at the job, I don't have to worry about it because so-and-so's on it? Do they have that confidence in your name, meaning that? If they don't, maybe you're choosing riches over the good name. All right, that's the summation. That was verse 1, guys. We got 15 more verses to go. Yeah. Let's get into, though, another verse here that comes up in verse 2. It says, the rich and the poor meet together, and the Lord is the maker of them all. Got 5 nice slides there. I want to thank Willie. He's not here right now, but he basically made these slides look better than they actually were when I did them. My favorite one there, without question, is the one on the right-hand side at the top by George Orwell. Rich people are poor people with money. I love it. It's so true. We're giving people status because they have money. They're the same poor person I am. They're as hungry as I am after lunch, as much as they have to go to the washroom after. You know what I mean? Like, they got human needs. They're the same. We give them more regard, though, because they have a little extra, or at least we perceive that. Bob Marley, Mr. Buffalo Soldier himself, Rastafarian, he said money is, that's on the far left, money is numbers, not politically, but just like on the far left of the screen. Money is numbers, and numbers never end. If it takes money to be happy, your search for happiness will never end. We're finding wisdom in our society, right? Let's go down below with Mr. Winnie the Pooh there, and I think that's Piglet. Poverty exists not because we cannot feed the poor. Okay, so stop there. That's usually what we would think, though. Oh, there's so much poverty because the poor aren't getting fed. But this line says, but it's rather because we can never satisfy the rich. So when we're singing about satisfy us in the morning, right? It's the rich that need to be satisfied, as opposed to just needing to think that we need to feed the poor. I think there's a lot to think about there. And I wanted to move over to the far right before I get to the middle one. Henry Ward Beecher was a preacher in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And he said, he is rich or poor according to what he is, not according to what he has. It's not the possessions you have that make you who you are. Jesus said, the abundance of life, the abundance of possessions does not consist in what your life really is. Therefore, beware of being greedy, is what he says. When's the last time you ever been warned about being greedy? Right? And middle says it's the same God who made both rich people and poor people. What verse 2 is telling us is that irrespective of if they're rich or poor, they both have equal value before God. Equality is there. And we have to be careful that we're not letting society's view of whether this person's rich or famous to determine whether they're more important or not, because that's not true. Because we're looking at people before God, and we understand that when we meet each person, they're made in the image of God, whether they're young, if they have Down syndrome. If somebody, let's be clear, someone has Down syndrome, they're of equal value to someone who is considered normal and doesn't have any of these deficiencies, right? If someone is having severe schizophrenia, they are not of any less value to God than somebody who is a well-to-do person in their 40s doing their work. Let's be clear on that. Because we need to, and sometimes we can't be clear about it because we don't see these people enough. One of the experiences I had early this year, actually, was I went to a Chick-fil-A in Buffalo. And you just go in there and enjoying food and stuff. But what I was taken by was that there were a number of people who had special needs, Down syndrome as well. Specifically, there was a girl with Down syndrome sitting next to me, and we're eating food together at, which feels like a cafeteria more at Chick-fil-A. But I was like, this feels so esteemed. It affected my grace prayer that I prayed. I thank God for who I was seeing around because we all were at the table here together. I was recently hearing that, we need to stop trying to build higher walls with people and start building longer tables. And I think if we grasp that, we're getting the Christian vision in Markham in 2024. We need longer tables. We don't need higher walls and fences. When I was growing up, the fences for neighbors used to be this high. It was a chain link fence, no less. So you'd see your neighbor when they come in and out. Now, they're going to the heavens. It's like, did we just take big pieces of wood and erect them all going around so that we don't see each other? And then we make sure that we panel them properly so that we can't see them when they're walking by? What is wrong with us? Why are we doing this? Why are you worried about your privacy in your backyard? Meanwhile, your phone discloses your whole privacy to the whole world. What's wrong with us? It's one of these wisdom sermons today, The rich and the poor meet together. It's not realistic we're going to get through 16 verses in the allotted time. So we're going to have to make some segue here. So let's go to verse 6. This verse, for every parent worth their salt, you should know this verse, I would think, by heart. Train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Now remember, we said that is not promise, not a guarantee, but it is a hope we can have. There's a reason it's still in the scriptures. And this language that I've always heard about train up a child in the way they should go is about make sure you teach them and make sure that they, get the right training early and then they won't leave it when they're older. And that's not wrong. So that's parenting 101. We need to train up the children where we want them to go. But I want to send a shout out to moms and dads, and that doesn't mean if you're not that you shouldn't think about this, because one of the things I would say to anybody who hears parenting counsel or parents going through stuff, by God's grace, one day you're going to be one too, then you're going to kind of have an idea what's going on. And you don't want to wait till when you're in the middle of it to figure it out. You would be begging people to have known in advance how to do this, right? What threw me off in my studies is to recognize that the word train here, so going back to train, means dedicate. Now, I don't mean baby dedication when I say that, or children's dedication, but hear it this way. Dedicate a child in the way he should go, or she, even when he or she is old, he or she will not depart from it. Dedicate. Well, how would that might change the way I'm hearing this? It means, and this is something that the Proverbs are very much intent about when we're talking wisdom, you got to start off early with children and often. You cannot have let up on them. You have to be on them because there needs to be commitment at the core, specifically a commitment to Christ that you teach your kids at a very young age. If you don't, if you're watching the way curriculums are developed now, if you watch the way marketing is developed, they are very much interested in getting people at a very young age for name brand loyalty. There was a Coca-Cola executive in the book Salt, Sugar, and Fat. What a demonic trinity, eh? But that was, in that book, there was a Coca-Cola executive who went around the world, and he would always look to get kids hooked on Coca-Cola before they're 12. Because he said, if I get them before then, we got them for the rest of their lives. And he would talk about how they get diabetes, and he eventually resigned because his ethics were compromised, because he ended up realizing what he had done. But he knew it. You get them before 12, and you got them. What do you think's going on with the way curriculums have been made today to get kids to accept things that are immoral in terms of family building, and the way that there's perversion in sexuality today? They want to get kids at a young age, because if you get them when they're young, you have a chance at having them for the rest of your life. And that's what they're doing in society. Marketers are very skilled now. Why would you target towards a baby? A baby can't pay no money, but mom can. And if you get the kids, and that's where the actual expression teens came about through marketing, But how much more now tweens came about through marketing, because marketers are inventing categories to create needs that you didn't know you had, so that we could actually be able to get you to be name brand loyal for the rest of your life and make money off of you. That's the focus. We could go into pharmaceuticals. How the point there is that they just want to make you dependent on their drugs for a lifetime. The worst thing that could happen to you is that you die, because then they can't make money off you anymore. These are harsh realities. But people are dedicated to our kids. The question is, are we as parents as dedicated to our kids to ensure that they're starting off life early on with a strong sense of commitment to hard work? I mean, the book of Proverbs is going to go into hard work very much, right? For those of you who do white-collar work, who work in offices and stuff, would you despise if your son or daughter decided to go into blue-collar work, to take up the trades, for example? How would you feel about that? Would that bother you? Why would that bother you? Well, for the previous generation, they worked so hard immigrating to this country. They also worked hard with their hands, that they saw that that was too hard for them, that they didn't want that for their kids. And we're the inheritors of that in a lot of ways, right? That our parents didn't want us to work as hard. But the truth is, you need to be worked. This body, if it doesn't work, gets flabby, out of shape. It has to be worked. And one of the things that it used to do a lot was we'd be outside a lot, that we would be constantly using our bodies for things. But if we're sitting, I mean, that old ad still catches me. Sitting is the new smoking. I'm like, gee whiz. You know, we work so hard to get rid of smoking, now sitting's our problem. Like, we're never going to get it right, are we? But the sitting aspect, it's true. If you're sitting for long periods of time, I mean, physiotherapists are going to make money for the rest of their life because of us now sitting all the time, but that's a side note, right? Because our neck and our backs are always constantly having issues because we're constantly craning and sitting, but we also develop a bulge in our stomach because we're sitting all the time. What do you expect? If you're not moving, you're going to experience these things. Commitment at the core to hard work. Commitment at the core to having faith in Jesus Christ. Being loving, and this is where I want to go with this, because I don't know where I learned it, but it's ingrained in me, is that when you start something, you finish what you started. Do not leave it half done. So even yesterday when I did this slide, and Isaiah was peeking over my shoulder looking at it, I was like, what's one thing we need to finish that we started? And I was like, we watched half of that movie, Moana. We got to finish that movie. He didn't want to finish it. I didn't really want to finish it either. But we're going to finish this because we started it. Just because. Because I need you to have a story when you're older that my daddy always got me started, it was always going to be done. I am not the kind of person that likes things half done. Typically I'm the kind of person that meets deadlines when I was in school. When I had to start something, if it was due on Friday afternoon, I wasn't looking for an extension. I'm trying to figure out how to make sure I get this thing done so I can move on with my life. That's what I'm thinking. Finish what you start. What is something right now that's unfinished in your life that you should have known that you need to get at it and you need to dedicate yourself to it because you had those values ingrained in you? And if they weren't ingrained in you, it's not too late because you can teach it now to someone because you understand the importance of it. Spend time dedicating yourself at a craft. Finish what you start. It's not just about starting well. It's about finishing well. I think baptism is a way of understanding how we need to start well in the Christian journey. But we got to understand that we have a long road ahead of us. We got to learn to finish well too. And to finish well means that you have to follow through on your commitments. What are those things you're committed to, but you're half-hearted in your commitment? We'll come back to that in a little bit, but just keep that in your mind. Verse 8 and 9 are going to give us a contrast. At times we could look at these Proverbs and say, they're just a bunch of jumbled things all over the place. But actually some of these Proverbs are specifically placed where they are. Verse 8 reads, "Whoever sows injustice will reap calamity, and the rod of his fury will fail." Now, if you notice in verse 9, you won't see it there because it's a slightly different version, but it also starts with whoever in verse 9 as well. So you have the whoever's literally that read the I to help you connect the two. Whoever has a generous eye. The actual word in Hebrew is a good eye. It's singular. It's intended to be a singular good eye. That means that you're generous. So they're using the way Hebrews would talk, and they're just making it now palpable for us who are hearing it in English. Whoever has a generous eye will be blessed. for he gives of his bread to the poor. This contrast between the two of these are intended to show us the contrast between these two is going to be between those who are, there's going to be it's an agricultural metaphor of sowing and reaping. If you're sowing injustice and doing wrong, you're going to reap chaos in your life. Again, that's an observation from a wise man over a long period of time who says, I've noticed that when you're constantly stirring a hornet's nest, bad things are happening, right? And the world will call that karma, but they ain't know what they're talking about. There's no such thing as karma, right? We have a God who actually has ordered this universe a certain way, and he designed it so that we understand that what things are sown into do have consequences, including the good stuff, which is if you have a generous eye, if you are a generous person, and when people end up experiencing that generosity, they're going to be blessed from you. What's an example? Someone comes over to your house. They come over to your house. My neighbor would be a great example of this. Every time I'm over at his house, I just came from my house. I'm joined to the same house to him, but I'll come over. Need something to drink? We'll get some snacks going for you. I'm like, I just came from my house. I just drank a water actually before I came in here. But you're treating me like I came from Brampton to here. Like you're being very over the top. He says, listen, my dad taught me, you always make sure when people come into the house, make sure you take care of them, And then I went to this other person's house. One of the things I love as a pastor is I get to go to people's homes. I get to go into your sanctum. I get to be in your fiefdom and kind of get an idea how's life lived. It ain't about whether it's clean or dirty. It's just about I get to be in your space. I get to see your world and enter into your world. I love that. And I recall going into this one person's house for dinner with my family, and this family created an obnoxious amount of food. There's no way any human being was expected to be able to finish it. But that was the point. The point was, ain't no way over our dead body you're leaving here hungry still. And if you do, shame on us. That's the generous eye. You went all the way to the grocery, planned this whole meal out, went over the top on it, prepared all this food so that I could come here stuffed and leave here thankful that somebody would receive me that way. Middle Eastern hospitality is very much designed that way, folks. I think we need to learn from them how to be hospitable to people who come, whether you know them well or not. Have bottled waters lying around. Have extra snacks in the pantry. Design it in a way where you've actually thought these things through when you go to the grocery store, right? You have a generous eye, you'll be blessed because you're giving your bread to the poor as well. That's the opposite of sowing injustice and reaping calamity, is that you're giving to the poor. Giving to the poor can take on so many different ways. You can support a kid to go to camp. Remember Tim Hortons does these camp days? Listen, we could talk about tax write-offs and how they're probably making money off of it in the end, and it doesn't. But I'm talking about the spirit of it, though. You're sending a kid to camp. We go to a place up around Huntsville once a year, and there's a camp that's next to it, Camp Widgeon. Can't spell that one, but that's how it's pronounced. And that camp specifically is for kids from the Jane and Finch area, kids that are underprivileged, and those camps, people have invested and paid money for these kids to go to camp for free for a week or two. You know how expensive a camp is in Toronto, right? You're looking north of $500 and up. If you're getting specialized arts camps, you're looking probably at $1,000, right? They're getting driven up there, and they're getting brought back down, and they're taken care of. All their needs, they have room and rent, and everything else is taken care of, and they get a week to remember, and they get taught the ways of the gospel. A generous eye. If you find these organizations, you should partner with them, because if you put 10 cents in there, you just got some seed now in that ministry. And when you do that, you're also going to learn the importance of doing that for others. Be generous. If you're going to give someone a ride, don't look at your gas tank. Just do it out of the goodness of your heart, or don't do it at all, right? Do it because you want to. Do it because you realize someone has a need, not based on the fact, oh, geez, gas went up to 180. I can't do anything. Really? You can't do anything? I think you can. It's just it's about your heart, right? Or about your eye in this case. The eye and the heart go together for the Proverbs. This is a worthy contrast. What are you sowing into? Consider what you're reaping at this time might be the fruit of what you've been investing in. If you don't have any friends, chances are, have you really reached out to anybody to talk to them? Just putting it out there, right? I'm not accusing, I'm just simply observing. If you're not putting in the work, why would you expect a different outcome? Well, God's gracious and stuff. Yeah, he is. He also rewards hard work, but he doesn't reward it right away. One of the things I've learned about God, especially reading Proverbs this week, he is not rewarding instant quick fixes. And I know our society is completely the opposite. God rewards long-term growth in the same direction. He rewards that. And I'm talking about money. I'm talking about your lifestyle. I'm talking about exercise. I'm talking about those kind of things that your body was made for. You do these for long terms in the same direction, you're going to be all right. God honors that. He does not honor, though, somebody who wants to just flip something and come in quick and make a quick buck. He does not honor that. Even if it looks like they got away with it, don't kid yourself. They're not. Because God's against it. It's woven into the fabric of this universe that God does not reward quick flips. He rewards hard work, long-term direction, and that growth might be slow. But that's not the only reason I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I'm investing into what I know is good. Remember, money's not my motivation here solely. My motivation is growth. My motivation is to generate life. I mean, why do you have kids? Because you're lonely? That can't be a good reason. It could be a reason, not a good one. Good reason, though, would be I want to invest in the next generation. I want to build them up. And one of the best ways to do it is to have kids of your own. I cannot tell you how it affects your everyday life having kids in terms of now taking you out of the parenting like you're at work. Being a parent affects now the way you behave. You're more mindful or something. You're no longer just thinking alone of yourself, being a parent, because you're so trained now that you're constantly on the fly and you're always thinking about that other person. I think parenting is God's way of trying to get us to die to our selfishness, to be honest with you. And that's speaking from real time, 2 a.m. kind of stuff where not everything goes your way. Well, we got more words of wisdom coming, and it's verses 10 to 14, which I see as a block here. It reads, drive out the scoffer, and contention will go out. Even strife and dishonor will cease. So we just got to get rid of the scoffer is what he's saying. Scoffer is someone who mocks, right? Who's loudmouth, who's always boasting bombastically about things that are just making noise and causing strife. But the moment they're out, everything seems peaceful. He who loves purity of heart and whose speech is gracious, the king is his friend. Come back to that. The eyes of the Lord preserve knowledge, but he overthrows the words of the treacherous man. The sluggard says, there's a lion outside, I shall be slain in the streets. The mouth of an adulteress is a deep pit. He who is cursed of the Lord will fall into it. These are strong words. So let's get into this a bit. Let's talk about verse 13 first. The tortoise or the lion. Verse 13 reads, the sluggard. So sluggard is a way of saying someone who is a sloth or lazy, right? So you would have thought I would have taken a sloth as my picture of choice. And the sluggard talks here. He's given speech, and his speech is, there's a lion outside, I shall be killed in the streets. His focus, the sluggard is on what could be outside of there, right? I was just reading an article this week, I believe it was from the Atlantic magazine or one other one, and it was talking about how millennials stay home a lot. Boomers, they're just itching to go out for a night out, right? Go on the town, go to a restaurant. And they were noticing that millennials are spending very, very little time now wanting to go out. They actually enjoy just staying home, watching Netflix. Part of that is economically driven, as you could imagine, but it's also the safety aspect. There might be a lion in the streets. There might be something. And I mean, listen, let's not dumb that down. There are mass shootings that happen at movie theaters, malls, right? So it's not like we should treat this as if what they're thinking is bad, but it's just the reality that people prefer to stay at home more now than ever. That's kind of curious. But in that, the sluggard, and what makes them a sluggard is that they are fictitiously, imaginatively believing that there's something out there that could be harmful to them. Now, lion for us doesn't make sense because that sounds so exaggeratory. So let's use one that I think is more applicable, a bear. Because it is heard once in a while that a bear will find his way wandering down around the areas because he's looking for food and he's starving, right? It actually happened at a church, not a church, a school at Beaverton. It's up near 48, which isn't that far, guys. We're about a half hour from Beaverton. And there was a bear sighting near the school, so they put the whole school into lockdown because of the bear. And rightly so, because if a bear gets his hold on a kid, he's not going to think, let me give you a big bear hug. Pardon the pun. So having a bear or a lion on the streets, it's this fear that's driving the sluggard. But what is he getting at here is I think he's not focusing on the lion, the proverb, the wise man of the proverb. He's getting you to focus on the sluggard. And the sluggard here is better known as a lazy tortoise. Now, why would I think of a lazy tortoise? Is because tortoises are slow, but they also like to be in their shell. They don't like being vulnerable. And so they prefer to just stay at home and don't go on the streets. They're lazy in the sense here, and this is what I believe he's getting at in verse 13, is that they're making an excuse. That's the problem. I know you and I might not look at it the same way, because some of us might even say, oh, I feel lazy today. For the writer of Proverbs, he's like, ain't nobody want to be described as lazy around here. Do you know among the 7 deadly sins in the medieval times, sloth was seen as the worst? I want to repeat that because that still doesn't make sense to me. They used to have like this triangular prism, and they would show at the top, the number one worst sin of all of them was sloth, laziness. Not pride. I would have put pride there. I mean, just me speaking out loud. Or lust, or greed. You know, I think that laziness as the first, it would be worthwhile to do an academic paper just to find out why that was. What exactly was driving that? But laziness, lazy people always make excuses. Always. When it comes to parenting, some parents that don't raise their kids properly is because they're lazy. They make excuses. They blame the government for not giving enough rebate because of carbon tax, as if that has anything to do with your parenting right now. But again, it's not about that. It's about creating excuses because I'm trying to dodge responsibility. I don't want to do something. The sluggard, lazy bones, is saying, oh, you know, there's all kinds of stuff out there in the streets. I don't want to get killed. It's exaggeratory. It's a form of lying, right? Consider how well you know yourself, I'm appealing to. What kind of excuses have you made in the last week that indicate your laziness is kicking away at you? That old Adam still trying to make himself known in your life. In what ways are you like a tortoise, where you're slowly moving about, not doing anything much, just trying to make sure you're not vulnerable and you'll go in your shell? What have you been doing this week? How have you made excuses for yourself so that things could be more convenient, instead of thinking about the reality that I need to work hard. And yeah, I got to be vulnerable. I got to put myself out there. It's not always going to be comfortable. But I would warn you, if you're comfortable, your growth is limited. But when you actually are uncomfortable, your growth actually will be always higher than the return on being comfortable. And I hope that comforts you who are working hard. But if you're not working hard, then I'm appealing to you with what the proverb is saying. Don't make excuses for your life, because you're wasting your life. You're wasting opportunities. Do you know how many opportunities we could have missed out on because of the excuses we made? Because we didn't want to do it? Don't be that person. The tortoise or the lion. There are 5 references here from our verses 10 to 14 of evil speech. Did you catch that? Scoffers are speaking evil, like what they did at the cross on Jesus. If you're the Son of God, come down from here. That's scoffing, right? Second part of verse 10 talks about quarreling. Quarreling is you're constantly arguing because you want to prove you're right. That's what quarreling means, right? But that's also where evil speech comes in, because you can say a lot of harsh things. It says in verse 12b, so 12b means the second part of verse 12, words of the traitor that the Lord is said to be overthrowing. Traitor is someone who is a turncoat and is not faithful, right? Judas was an example of a traitor. Verse 13, we talk about the sluggard's words, and then we also have the mouth of the forbidden woman or the adulteress, as was described here. So there's 5 there, but there's only 1 reference to righteous speech in there. 5 to 1. It says in verse 11, he who has purity of heart and whose speech is gracious will have the king as his friend. Why would you think there would be 5 references of evil speech but only 1 reference of something good? Is that by just happenstance, or is there not something calculated about those numerical things? I think there is something to it. I think the conclusion is, and this is actually where a lot of wisdom proverbs are going, is you haven't heard a wise proverb if you didn't feel warned by what you heard. If you don't get a sense of danger in what is being said, and if you also don't get a sense that I'm being rebuked here or being warned, then you didn't hear that. You still need to listen to it a little closer. Because there's always a rub in those proverbs. They are not designed to make you feel comfortable about the way you're living. It's always looking at amending, mending, remending, looking to make things uncomfortable for us to realize and consider, how are you living right now? One of the few times I see in society right now where people are thinking about the way they live are at weddings and funerals. Because at weddings, you think about how your life went. Am I married? Why aren't I married? You're watching a marriage, but you're only thinking of yourself. It's just natural. It's not a selfish thing. It's a thing. You go to a funeral and you see a dead person there. That's why I feel like you need to see the dead body. I really am a big believer in it, right? Because you need to see that someone died here. You need to physically see that and make sense of that in your own life. And when you see that, you start thinking about, how am I living my life? What's my funeral going to be like? You know whose funeral I'm really interested in? I wish I could have had a chance to see, was O.J. Simpson's. I don't know if you guys are familiar with O.J. Simpson. He was a running back for the Buffalo Bills before his life turned really bigger than himself, when he ended up being accused of killing his ex-wife and her boyfriend. And he had this dream team of lawyers, including Robert Kardashian, who for Kim Kardashian, her dad was in that. Johnny Cochran, though, this black attorney, he was the head guy on it. This became a political issue about black and white, though, in L.A. And interestingly enough, O.J. Simpson actually did no favors for the black community, even though he was black. He was more whitewashed, if I can be honest with you. And so got all these politics going on in the case. And they never found the murder weapon, so that was always a big issue. But he was trying to put this glove on, which was said to be used for the murder. And he's trying to put it on, he's like, I can't fit it. He's like, look, can't fit it probably. And then famously, Johnny Cochran ended up saying, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit, to the jury. It was a very memorable line. And people listened to that case, and pretty much Rodney King had been, just 1991, Rodney King in LA had been beaten to a bloody pulp, even though he lived, but he was left in a wheelchair, by 5 white police officers in LA. That came a couple years before the O.J. Simpson trial. If O.J. Simpson doesn't get off here, we could have the riot that happened in light of the footage that came out about Rodney King was part of the worry that was going on. So what was justice going to look like? And then the moment came down where the verdict was handed, and he was pronounced as not guilty. Unbelievable. This is the stuff of drama, but it really happened in life. To this day, I believe he killed her and the boyfriend because of jealousy. And he just was able to get off because there was some politics outside of the courtroom. O.J. Simpson ends up dying just 2 weeks ago. I'm very interested what that funeral looked like, because who showed up? When you think about who would show up at the wedding, at the funeral rather, of O.J. Simpson, you kind of get a sense of what his life was like, right? Who showed up? Who's here? Right? I would imagine a lot of lawyers and attorneys showed up at his life because he was very much involved with them in his life. But what about his family? Did they show up? You wonder. These are all things you're thinking about because you're making connections on your life. I'm saying weddings and funerals are 2 of the last places people are making connections these days. That something about life is warning me about the way I live. You got scripture to help you do this. The conclusion we're drawing here is that we are being warned not to participate. This is about the evil speech, right? Why there's 5 and there's only one righteous one. Because it's saying we need to be warned not to participate or to be involved in any way with the dialogue of the wicked. It's a wisdom saying in Psalm 1:1. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the ungodly or stand in the way of sinners or sit in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. Right? It's a contrast. And the contrast there is that our lives need to be very aware of the company we keep at any age and stage of your growth. It's not only for when you're young, it's for as you get older as well. Who you surround yourself with will start shaping your habits. And that's for better or for worse. How much more so, though? And again, this is where Proverbs is on about something that, again, I am very interested why the Proverbs always bring it up, but they're always interested when they want to talk about whether you're godly or whether you're wicked, is how do you talk? Like, really? That's the thing you're worried about? You're worried about my mouth? Do you know how many people run their mouth in society? Just running their mouth. And that includes bad tweets and nasty things that are posted on IG. Like, I'm including all that, right? Because that's just a form of your mouth. You know how many people just live like that and they just run their mouth all day long, complaining, making excuses, condemning, blaming, always looking for fault? The proverb goes, yeah, well, you're a wicked person because you do that. Like, huh? Yeah. The sluggard talks and look at what he says, and it doesn't come out right. Don't get involved in the wicked conversation of people at your workplace who would want to tear down your boss. Even if your boss is a tool or a piece of work, that doesn't mean you should join in on it and give them concrete examples of how they're a 10-carat jerk. You should not encourage that. You should actually find a way to remove yourself from it. If you're noticing when you go to the water cooler that they're always talking nasty things, then maybe you got to bring your bottle of water to work instead. You got to find wisdom. You can't be around people who are toxic with their mouths, because that's affecting your heart, and it shapes your mind. And you learn now to tear down people when they're not around. That's not God's ways. It's not a wise way. And that's what he's drawing as a conclusion for us on why there's 5 bad things he's telling you about them, but only 1. He's not saying it's not possible. He's just saying it's 5 to 1. It's just not happening very often. The eyes of the Lord keep watch over knowledge, but he frustrates the words of the unfaithful. Words. Pay attention to your words. We live in a society today that says words, talk is cheap and all that stuff. But no, words matter to the proverb, to the sage, right? Like he's saying, no, how you talk actually matters a whole lot. And in fact, I can gauge how your life is spiritually by what you say. But I thought what I say is just a bubbly blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. It's what I do, right? Not necessarily. Well, we got to get the interpretive link here. There's a link in this passage, and it's verse 14. That brings us to the place where we see that it's working dually here, and it's the forbidden woman. The forbidden woman here is the one who is a personification of folly. No, notice again, it says the mouth of the forbidden woman or the adulteress is a deep pit, and he with whom the Lord is angry will fall into it. So this forbidden woman, she shows up earlier on in Proverbs. She's known as Lady Folly, and she is a foil to Lady Wisdom. Earlier on. You can read about this from Proverbs chapters 1 to 9. You'll hear about Lady Wisdom. The word wisdom is chokhmah, which is feminine. So that's why they're playing off of her being personified as a woman, because of the feminine noun that they're using. The adulteress is one who seduces with her words. You can read about this in Proverbs 9:17, where she says to the young novice, the lamb that is being led to the slaughter, as it were, to her house, she says, stolen waters is sweet, and the bread eaten in secret is pleasant. In other words, let's lie together, and let's yoke together in relationship, right? The proverb, though, says her words are like a deep pit, and whoever falls into that pit, the Lord is angry. That's why you're there. It's a strong rebuke, and, there's danger there, we're being told, right? Power of suggestion. I talked about this a little earlier that I want to bring now full circle on this. A.W. Tozer, who was a man of God who lived in the 1960s, I want to say, he was actually a pastor at Bayview Glen Church. And his way of bringing about life was quite strong. But He said this in 1960. We're living 2024 right now. And it says here, many are the brainwashed from 9 o'clock in the morning or earlier until the last eyelid flutters shut at night because of the power of suggestion. These people are uncommitted. They go through life uncommitted, not sure in which direction they're going. I want you to catch that power of suggestion and being uncommitted. The two pigeons talking there are just talking about synonyms to the power of suggestion, one of which is self-deception and self-delusion, which I can't help but just think, yeah, that's actually a good way of bringing it. Because who's doing power of suggestion every day on you is your robot and my robot, the phone. This phone is making suggestions to you left, right, and center every single minute of your day. 80% of people wake up in the morning, touch their phone. You think you're just going to your phone to look at the time? It turns into something more. You swipe, you look, you end up getting feeds, you end up seeing what other pop-ups on your phone come, you begin to read it, your day's already started. And that's what Tozer's talking about. He says, and he's calling us brainwashed, right? We're brainwashed because our phones are giving us an algorithm that pretty much is downloaded on our brain that leads us away from being able to be actually focused on the true business of life. Because now we're focused on what so-and-so's doing on IG. Now we're focused on what did I miss, right? Pay attention to that. Our phones are a monster in our hands. They really are. And it's dangerous. And I hope you're feeling the sense of danger with it, because the suggestions they're giving to you, how much clickbait is there that is constantly, even if you're not clicking on it, you saw the picture. And it's sewing on your mind now. It creates basically a hermeneutic of suspicion, where you're constantly mistrusting. We live in a society today, and it's very weird because this wasn't always the case, that people think that if you're more suspicious, somehow you're more smart. And if you're more trusting, somehow you're naive and you're an idiot. Do you know that society's like that? And so it's pretty en vogue right now to believe in conspiracies. So when that ship ends up hitting the Baltimore Bridge, you really think that was an accident? That's the first thought I've heard people tell me immediately. We can't actually believe that this could have been what it was, for reasons that I don't pretend to have all the knowledge. I would encourage you to lean towards being trusting. Being trusting does not equate to being naive. It just means you're now facing reality and you're willing to deal with it as it comes. But don't tell me that being suspicious means that you're learned. Somehow it's turned into that, though, in a post-liberal democratic society. And I'm not buying it. And again, what suggestions are you unaware of in the past week that if you look back on maybe the history of your phone could already give you an idea what's been fed into you? Our phone has robots that are trying to attack what we're doing. Right? They're listening to you. How many times have I talked about something random like drywall, and then there and lo and behold on my phone is an ad on drywall? Right? Like, your phone is listening to you. Your phone is listening to you. Jesus is Lord, right? So we want to start telling the phone. We want to let them know who wears the pants here, and it ain't the phone. Power of suggestion. That's why actually evangelism is where advertisers learn to do what they do. Because when people used to do evangelism, they would always encourage you to consider Jesus. Have you thought about him? Inviting you into life. Nobody I knew did it better than the founder of this church, Pastor Nelson. I mean, Krentz, I think, jokingly talked about being invited into an MBA, and then he realized everybody's being invited into an MBA. Like, is that, yeah? Because he would always, before I became pastor of this church, I had to turn him down like 99 times, and I'm not exaggerating. You know, this is why you should come to my church. You're good people. He wasn't wrong. It's just that wasn't what like, how did you turn it into that again? Somehow he just keeps suggesting because he knows the power of suggestion. I want to encourage you this week, let's flip this thing on its head and actually start now, instead of the phone making all these suggestions, let's go around and start making suggestions left, right, and center. And understand that, listen, rejection's going to happen. It's part of life. Don't take it personally. But just start suggesting, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? Why not do this? Like, be resourceful. Prove to people there's more solutions than problems in their life by the power of suggestion. We got to get moving. Be wise and consider. Here we go. Verse 14, 15, and 16. Remember we said verse 14 is the interpretive link here. The mouth of the adulteress is a deep pit. He with whom the Lord is angry will fall into it. Well, that also, which functioned from 10 to 14, now functions on 14 to 16. It's a hinge that works both ways. And it carries a theme that reminds us, don't look at these Proverbs like they're all random and individualized and they're just thrown around here. They're actually put there on purpose. On purpose, literally. And they call us further, these three verses, what they are calling us to. The mouth of an adulteress is a deep pit. He with whom the Lord is angry will fall into it. Verse 15, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline drives it far from them. And lastly, verse 16, oppressing the poor to enrich oneself or giving gifts to the rich will surely lead to poverty. There is a connection with all three of those verses. And I want us to be wise and consider what they are. And so we got to make connections. Every sermon you hear from me, I want you to make connections. I'm always about making connections. And part of what I do in my strategy is like Jesus with his parables is, I don't always tell you what they are. I want the Spirit to make that connection for you and make something click. It's because, frankly, that's the way you get these sermons. I'm not going to just lay out everything for you. I'm doing it, but I'm not. I'm wanting you to trust God to speak to you about what exactly needs to be remedied, spoken to, encouraged about, edified. In these three verses, there is wickedness. There's the mouth of the forbidden woman or the adulteress. There's the folly of the child. And there's the oppression of the poor. Now, I know when you hear that, you're like, really? The folly of a child is that bad? That's because you don't take it seriously enough. You've got to take seriously that a child who's out of control is a menace to society. You've got to see it that way. Because if you don't, who's going to teach them? I go through seasons of that with my boys, where I realize that there's certain things they're doing where it's a full court press. And you're having problems inbounding the ball. I'm using a basketball metaphor, but you're trying to just get the ball in, and I'm constantly on you. I'm not letting you go. But I don't do that every single hour of every day, because I do have a relationship. Connection, though, has to come before correction, right? You need to say that to yourself. If you're not connected with your child, don't strive to correct them right away, because they don't take it well. They need to know that they're secure first before you start telling them everything they do that's wrong, right? You have to also realize you've been raised by Asian parents. That's not a fault. That's just a reality that reminds you that Asian parenting is not big on encouragement and blessing you and kissing you. They're big on, how do I say this kindly? They're just big on making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do. Can I say that? Instead of encouraging you. And I think, listen, society's gone on the other end of the spectrum. So you got Asian parenting on one side, but then you got this gobbledygook in society where it's all about self-esteem of the kid. Like, we cannot teach Junior anything. We're just going to let him figure it out for himself type of thing. Instead of just telling him, hey, it's wrong, eh? Right? Oh, you hurt my esteem when you said that, right? No, we gotta understand. There's things that are right and wrong, and they need to be told, and I hope the parent is the one that's going to help them make those connections. The folly of a child is as bad as the mouth of the forbidden woman and the oppression of the poor. That's what it's linked with. That's how bad this is. So don't misunderstand about the dedicating your child when they're young and when they're old, they won't depart from it. There's a reason they won't depart from it, because you basically ingrained it into them. You've driven it into them. The connection here in these verses is between wickedness and disciplinary judgment. I know that sounds harsh and condemning, but you are in the world of the Proverbs, where wisdom is not very common, and we need to find some. So he comes at it with rhetorical strength. And he says it this way. He says, the disciplinary judgment for the wickedness of the mouth of the forbidden woman is that I will use that forbidden woman, that prostitute, that unfaithful woman, as an instrument of my punishment, God will do. How about that? And then secondly, the folly of a child that is wound up here, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. Listen, I grew up in the generation where I was beat when I was doing wrong, okay? And I can remember my mom saying while she's whacking me, spare the rod, you spoil the child. It's like, okay. Any choice thing. I always found those little thin things like the things from a broom and stuff, or long ones we had in Trinidad and stuff like that, and use those to whip. Those ones hurt the most. Those ones left that one. Hey, listen, I don't have let's talk about spanking for a moment here. Spanking is not wrong. Sorry. Spanking is not wrong. I'm looking into the camera to make sure you know I'm not stuttering. I meant it. Spanking is a way that was used for, thousands of years, and suddenly we're the enlightened bunch that don't do it? Do you notice that kids don't appear to always be disciplined the same way? Listen, I don't spank my kids. Their ears are still on their head, so they're doing okay. But I do recognize that why it happened that spanking no longer was encouraged in our contemporary times was because there was so much rampant child abuse. And families were so broken that they had to deal with it, and that was the solution. I don't find fault with that, but I understand the why. There has to be understanding, right? Does that mean I can't hit my child on the bum if they do something wrong? No. If that's going to help them wake up and realize that what they're doing is wrong, just don't do it on their face or other areas that are very sensitive to a small person, you understand. But I think God gave us a bum for a reason, and it wasn't to sit all day. I think it was intended that we would understand that we are those who are made, we're made for hard work. We're made for even punishment. I know we don't want to hear that because we're so soft, right? But we need to understand that we were made that if push came to shove, let's go to war. Let's do this. We'll go in the trenches. We'll do what we need to get done. It's in us, guys. It just doesn't get tapped into. That's all I'm trying to say. The rod of discipline will drive out folly. You know, somehow you're going to remember, because you've been shocked into it, is I guess a way of understanding. Like, last time I did that, I got my beats for that. So I could do two things. One, I could try to outsmart them and see if I can get around it again this time. Or I could maybe realize, you know what, it happened to me. Or the third option where I saw my sibling go through it and I could laugh at them. Or also realize, we're not doing that again. Some of us don't learn, though, unless we go through it, right? Some of us have to get whipped. Others of us can see someone whipped and realize, I don't want to do that. There's some of us. I don't know how it's divvied up in this room exactly, but it's there. We're there. I don't know which one are you, but I hope your self-awareness or the Holy Spirit's nudging you to tell you who you are. And lastly, the oppression of the poor are those who practice injustice will come to ruin. Do not glamorize people who scam people. You know, I think about those scammers on the phone and stuff like that, right? Who call. I'm getting this Mandarin woman every week calling me. I'm like, it's obviously a robot, but, starting to speak Mandarin to me and, clearly you're not meeting the context here properly to let me know the CRA's after me type of thing. But someone's going to pay for that. You're not getting away with that forever. It's not just a robot doing it. Human control robot, no? Button push by human, robot go do bad thing. Right? That's just the way it works, cause and effect. Those who are oppressing the poor, who are taking advantage of elderly people, because they get scammed probably the most out of all these things. Things that you and I are like, well, who would go into that? Well, you'd be surprised. And then there are those who are children, right? Who are oppressed because they don't get taught properly in their own ways. I think there's another way of saying that. Injustice is what is going to bring them to ruin. So let's bring it to full circle then. This is his world. This is our daddy's world. This is our father's world. And things do work according to his timetable and to his law. This line, though, is sized up for everybody in this room who doubts that. Because you see, together, let us be assured internally. I've crafted these words very specifically because I'm anticipating a doubting response. Together, let us be assured internally within ourselves that God metes out justice in his world. Yeah, but what about that person who took advantage of that woman and stole her purse? Be assured internally within yourself that God metes out justice in his world. You have to be persuaded on that. That's a faith matter. And if you're not, you're just buying into the power of suggestion that the rest of society's duped into and drinking from the same muddy stream. No, this is God's world, and it's been running for a while, and it will continue to long after you and I have been buried, not cremated, when we die. We are called then to do what? To be warned. You want to know you heard Proverbs right? Was I warned today of anything that if I do it, I'm going to end up messing things up? Yeah, I hope you did. Was I also told that I need to witness to this truth too? Yeah, I hope so. And what are you called to witnesses to? God has hands, right? And those hands are not sitting in his lap today. In fact, that image of a crook, a club, or a staff, depending on how you hear it, but he has that in his hand. And he uses that to shepherd people. What is that hook for? Is that when the sheep goes astray, he can bring them back. But the Bible also says that there's a club he has. You know about the club? Not the one they put on the cars, but the club that's literally like a stubby device. And it's used to, you ain't moving, I want to whack you one and smack you. Right? To soft people, we're like, oh my goodness, that's so, did you think about the feelings of the sheep when you did that? Instead of thinking, well, maybe they're not moving and there's danger in front of them and we need to get moving here. We don't think like that anymore because we're soft. We're expecting people to entitle us even though we don't do anything. That's just you inheriting a whole bunch of stuff that's just filling your mind and your heart with toxins. And you're ruining other people because of that. You're a bad citizen. You're not being taught. You can't be coached. You don't show understanding, nor do you want to. God has hands at work and they're disciplining. And they discipline us because he loves us. That's what the Bible tells us. You can read that in Bible in Revelation 3:14. For those whom the Father loves, he chastens. Do you want to know you want to know for yourself if I'm a Christian or not? Here's your clue. Not do I have the feels inside. I feel the Spirit. It's, do I get chastened by God? Have I experienced his rebuke? The Bible tells me open rebuke is better than secret love. That's a proverb as well. Open rebuke. That I tell you to your face rather than I hide feels in my heart. It's better to be disciplined. You know your life at this stage. Do you listen to anybody when they tell you something? Or do you take it personal and you get upset with them and you avoid them? You know your heart whether you're doing that or not. Check yourself. If you're doing that, God's actually trying to get your attention with all of this stuff. That's why God sends pain in your life. It's because he wants to torment me. Hey, let us be assured internally within ourselves that God metes out justice in his world. This is his world. He knows what he's doing better than we do. We need to be assured inside of ourselves, God's disciplining me for a purpose. Psalm 23, verse 4, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The word comfort comes from the Latin calm fortis, meaning with strength. Your rod and your staff strengthen me. We got everything we need, folks. There's nothing lacking. We got the Proverbs today. Wise up and rise up. And let's get busy about the business of God's kingdom and do good unto others and practice generosity. Avoid injustice. Don't participate in evil. Remove yourself from those bad conversations. And let's let the shepherd guide us, whether it be through the shadow of death or whether it be to his table at the house of the Lord. We're going to sing This Is My Father's World. I'm not singing it, so don't worry. But what we're going to sing is because that's a confession of faith. Faith is being sure of what we hope for even though we don't see it. So today's your day to confess your faith in this song. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to participate in this together.